That's been the talking point, and economists have, well, divergent views on this particular matter just after the MPs' meeting, which retained at 13%. The cash reserve ratio was also slashed at 31% to 25%, rather from 31% to 25%. Joining us to look at this this morning is the Chief Executive Officer of RTC Advisory Services, Okpayemi Agbaje. Good morning and thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
You know, looking at some of these things, it would seem as if the CBN has already sent out a signal. Trying to read that particular signal for you as an economist, what did you see?
Well, it was obvious. If you've seen the second quarter GDP report from the National Bureau of Statistics, indeed I wrote about this a week earlier, we titled Economic Red Flags in my column, and spoke on the issue on one or two other places. It's clear from the second quarter economic report that the economy is headed downwards. Now, whether it will get to an actual recession or not, in my view, depends on what we do. So a recession is not inevitable. But in the second quarter of 2014, the Nigerian economy grew by 6.54%. In the second quarter of 2015, it grew by 2.35%. In the first quarter of 2015, it grew by 3.9 or so. So the direction is very clear. If you go into beyond the totality and go into specific sectors, you would find that manufacturing is in recession. The manufacturing sector has had 2 quarters of negative growth and getting larger. So in the first quarter of this year, manufacturing sector growth was about 0.7 negative. So that was the first quarter it went negative. In the second quarter, it's about 6% or so. I don't remember the exact figure, or maybe 4%. But it's a negative figure, a bigger negative. So again, that's clear. If you look at the trend in terms of jobs, and again from the NB's National Bureau of Statistics Q2 report, you see a drastic decline in employment. Both unemployment rose and underemployment rose. And by those figures, about 20 million, 19.8 million Nigerians are now out of work, rising from about 16, 17 million just a quarter earlier. So you had both unemployment go from 16 to 18 or so percent, and then underemployment go from 16 to 18%, and then unemployment from 7.5 to 8.8%. So all the indices point to I would not say a recession, but a drastic decline in output and employment. And then on the other hand, inflation is headed in the other direction. And so we have seen for the past few months a steady increase in inflation from 7.8, 8, 8.2, 8.3, 8.5, 9, 9.2, 9.3 as of August. So the indices are speaking clearly that you are declining in terms of growth, which is what we are discussing this morning, but also in terms of employment, whereas inflation is going the other way. So if you do nothing, the direction is clear. So when the CBN said it's a correct caution because the direction is clear if you do nothing. And so I agree completely. Indeed, I preceded the central bank in advocating that. By the way, some of this is caused by some of the actions, or there's the contribution by some of the actions of the central bank itself. So I recall that on July 9, when the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry had this seminar on Forex guidelines from the CBN, at which I was the moderator, I asked the central bank's delegation what they thought would be the impact of their policies on precisely these indices: output, employment, and inflation. So it's not a mystery that has just come upon us. Yeah. We have a decline in the price of oil, which is a significant part of our income, and we are adding to the decline by doing policies that, in my view, have been responsible for lower output and lower employment. Meanwhile, on the fiscal side, there is absolutely no action.
Is it that the
economic policy direction, or in some cases where positions have been taken, in my view, wrong positions have been taken. So a combination of that is invariably is clearly explicable. It would produce declining growth.
Now, we've seen that our major source of income, oil, has been declining for a while. It didn't start today. And the policies, as you said, keep doing the policy, and then our practices tend to be fueling that decline. Is it that the policies, which were thought to be, were being thought out to help the situation, is it that they were not thought through?
Absolutely not. Let me give my fundamental diagnosis of the issues with the Nigerian economy. Because I think we need to go back to fundamental diagnosis. We are looking for quick fixes. And I hear people talk about a lot of quick fixes. But the fundamental diagnosis of the Nigerian economy is that, one, it is not diversified. Two, it is not efficient. Three, it does not have equity in terms of taking care of the poor, and I'll explain each of those. And then the growth itself. We used to have good growth, but now that growth itself is in danger. So we have challenges of diversifying the economy, of improving economic efficiency, of improving equity, so that the distribution of what you get is fair to everybody, and you don't produce 100 million poor people and a few people who are in the middle class, and fewer people still who are in the upper class. And then you need growth. Because of the sheer size of this country and the growth rate of our population at about an average of 3% every year, the minimum we must do is to grow this economy by at least 7, 10, 15%. Because there's a large population and a significant growth rate of population. So to stay on the same spot, otherwise poverty increases. So now, when we talk about diversification, there are 3 levels of diversification that the Nigerian economy needs. Of output, which is what we're talking about this morning, of government revenue, which is why states can't pay salaries, and why there's a crisis, of fiscal crisis, and why we can't have capital expenditure, and then of exports, so that our exchange rates can be stable. The reason our exchange rate is not stable is that our exports are not diversified. So we only export a crude, a one product, crude, in its primary form. We don't even refine it. So once anything happens to the price or volume of crude, we're in.
And that's why a number of people say that, you know, we seem to be in trouble. Because if you listen to the CBN governor, he said that, you know, if we don't do anything in the areas of agriculture and production, as in manufacturing, we will definitely be headed for a recession. That's because he also knows that we have absolutely nothing, or we can't do anything about the price of oil.
I think there are some things we can do.
What I mean is, we can't do anything about the price of oil.
Absolutely.
So some people are hoping, I think there was a report that came out this month from the Economist Financial Intelligence saying that if the price of crude oil were to come up a little by sometime next year, we should be seeing growth figures, you know, going up again. There was a prediction that this was going to happen because we're expecting about $50 per barrel of crude, and perhaps that's where we found ourselves. This situation in terms of manufacturing and agriculture is something that we've constantly battled with. But do you think that it is getting worse because there's been no action in the fiscal area?
I'll make some background comments. So, first of all, yes, there's reports that oil may be 54 and 58 in 2016 and 2017. But there's another view from Goldman Sachs that there's significant overproduction of oil, and therefore, Goldman Sachs says oil prices could drop to as low as $20 per barrel. Now, either way is not good for us. At 50, 56, we're not significantly better off. We still have a significant shortfall in revenue. At 20, we have a disaster on our hands. Those resisting devaluation will now have to do, in the $20 scenario, imagine the extent of crisis that we're facing. So the point is, the reliance on that crude in itself is wrong-headed. Because you need, like I said, so even if we were going to be a monoproduct economy, let us be exporting refined petroleum products rather than oil in crude form. At least let's increase the proportion of refined petroleum products in our export base rather than crude. Secondly, we have solid minerals endowments. We've reformed our laws, and I've said this for 8 years. In 2007, when Obi Ezekwesili was Minister of Solid Minerals, we did all the structural reforms needed to catalyze solid minerals growth, including passing new legislation, establishing a cadastral office, documenting all the mines available in all the states. The only thing that we didn't do is that we did not pursue those reforms once that lady left that office. And once oil prices went high, we stopped talking about solid minerals. So that's a significant area. It's ready. All we need to do is to get investors.
But we're still talking resources, and some people will say that that's still a danger. But it's still,
yes, it's also still crude. I mean, it's also still primary. So again, even if we did exploit that, we should try to go into the value chain. So it's not just you take mines and you export it. You take that mine, you look at its value chain, you get people to invest in extending the value chain, in refining it, in producing things out of it, so that you create jobs, so you diversify your economy. But the point is, oil prices can go down, but maybe, what's the one we use for roads? Bitumen may go up, or at least you use it for road construction. And there are many other things. Minerals, we have a vast area.
Let us tie this price of crude oil to another area which quite a number of people thought we should have done away with by now, which is subsidies. I think it was Bismarck Rawane who was making reference to what Angola did. You know, they got rid of subsidies and they were able to see what they could get from that. Do you think that that's one area we should be looking at?
I said earlier that in some of the, we have not articulated a coherent policy, but in those areas where we have defined policy, we've made the wrong choices. So we excite ourselves, pretending to be defending the poor who don't benefit from fuel subsidies. And we make wrong decisions that perpetuate the structural dislocations of the Nigerian economy. So the subsidy ought to have been the first thing this government should have removed. It's inefficient. It ties us into this structure of importing petrol rather than refining it domestically. It prevents investment in the sector by people who want to establish local refineries. It's an elitist, middle class and elite subsidy that doesn't benefit the poor. It's wrong.
With the way the refineries
and then given our fiscal situation, it's suicide to persist in that structure when you need money for real poor people, for infrastructure, for social investments in the poor, for education, for health, for the things that can make a transformational impact on your country and your populace. You persist in a transactional subsidy that perpetuates a structure of
the subsidy is not out
and it contributes to the pressure on our exchanges.
That's if the subsidy has not been removed, because sometimes the kind of reading you get, and it will seem as if there's no subsidy already from the refiners.